Welcome to Behind the Mic with AudioFile magazine. This is publisher Michele Cobb, and we are celebrating AudioFile's selections for Best of the Year Audiobooks 2024. Today we're going to talk about young adult audiobooks, and narrator Alejandro Antonio Ruiz provides insights on a title from our list. That's coming up soon. But first, here are AudioFile selections for Best Young Adult Audiobooks of the Year. A Crane Among Wolves by June Her, read by Greg Chun and Michelle H. Lee. How the Boogeyman Became a Poet, written and read by Tony Keith Jr. Jupiter Rising by Gary D. Schmidt, read by Christopher Gebauer. 24 Seconds From Now by Jason Reynolds, read by Guy Lockard. When the World Tips Over by Jandy Nelson, read by Michael Crouch, Alex McKenna, Briggan Snow, Caitlin Kinnunen, and Julia Whalen. And Canto Contigo by Jonny Garza Villa, read by Alejandro Antonio Ruiz. Thanks so much for joining us, Alejandro.
Thank you, Michelle.
And congratulations on narrating one of the best YA audiobooks of 2024.
I know. Thank you so much. It was certainly not expected and came as a pleasant surprise.
Well, it's a testament to your work. Can you tell us a little bit about this title?
Sure thing. Canto Contigo is a novel by Jonny Garza Villa. They are a non-binary Chicane queer author based in San Antonio, Texas. They mainly write YA fiction. Some listeners might know their other novels, 1500 Miles from the Sun, as well as Ander and Santi Were Here. But Canto Contigo is their third full-length novel. It's a rivals to lovers romance that centers around this young Mexican-American mariachi star named Rafael Alvarez, who is dealing with a lot of change in his life. He's transferring to a high school for his senior year. He's hoping to be handed a lead vocalist spot at his new school's mariachi band because he's this award-winning singer. He has a legacy to protect. He's applying to colleges, but he's also grieving a recent loss in his life. And in the midst of all of that, as life tends to do, he meets someone who is kind of cute and might also be standing in the way of his success. So from there, the story kind of unfolds.
There's so many emotions running through this book, and your characterization and presentation of the main character is really so full of life. So tell us, how do you bring all these emotions and that sense of tension into your narration?
Ooh, yeah. So Rafi's a very emotional protagonist. I'll start by saying that when I listen to audiobooks, I've never been fond of moments where it feels like I can hear a narrator holding back,
Hmm.
where it feels like, and maybe some listeners can relate to this, where it feels like you hear someone being like, and not too loud, and it's almost like a stage whisper or a stage scream. And for me, as someone who does narrate, it's like I can hear the director on the other side of the glass being like, "You're gonna peak." And for those who don't know, peaking is when you speak too loud and the gain on your mic isn't set low enough to accommodate for the increased vocal volume. So you get that kind of fuzzy, unusable audio that you hear sometimes when a person's yelling or their mouth is too close to the mic. So, anyway, sometimes it feels like I can hear that fear in the narrator that they're going to be too loud, and it irks me as a listener. So I put myself in those shoes because I don't like that diminished emotion, certainly not because of technology constraints. So
Yes.
I I tend to handle a lot of the tech on my end by myself. I like to control my own mic levels. I like to edit my own work. I feel like I get to craft a performance that feels fully connected and like it gives me room to play. So that when an author does write Rafi shouts, I can actually shout and still have that audio be usable and not hurt people's ears when they're listening to the book. I'm biased though because I come from working in video games mostly,
Aha.
where it's all about following those natural impulses, focusing on your acting, so I think that's kind of what I bring into it. In regards to this specific book, Rafi, the protagonist of Canto Contigo, he's so emotional. He's not perfect. He's like all of us. He makes mistakes. He gets angry, very angry, which we can do in the midst of grief. He can be kind of a brat and cocky and harsh because he's very ambitious, but he's also at a point in his young life where he feels a bit broken and where he desperately wants to believe that there's something worth holding on to, and that something might be love, maybe. So I felt it important to illustrate all of those facets of who he is because that's what makes us human, and that's what drew me to accepting the offer to narrate this book in the first place, that he's so complicated, which we don't often see depicted with Latine characters. I definitely say that Canto Contigo is a book for readers who have the patience to follow a realistic, albeit sometimes very frustrating, teenage protagonist. And I've read a lot of reviews who point out like how beautifully frustrating Raffi is, and I agree because some of my favorite artists and people are also both of those things.
Well, I can say from personal experience, teens are messy, right?
Yeah. And Raffi is very messy.
So, what research did you do when you prepared for recording this book?
So for me, the journey of Canto Contigo started, as all great stories do, with a Twitter DM. A few years ago, the author Johnny posted the cover of Canto Contigo as a preview of their upcoming releases. For those who haven't seen the cover, it's this painted image of two young people, one black, one Latine, holding hands, facing opposite directions, very dramatic, wearing white and red mariachi charros. And behind them, there's like these scattered cempasúchil flowers. People might know those flowers as the bright orange marigolds for Dia de Muertos, and they form the shape of a heart. So I saw the cover and I was like, I need to get on this. I need to be involved somehow. This is too beautiful to pass up. I sent the photo to my partner who's black and commented that it looked like a photo of us in an alternate timeline where we
Oh,
like met as teenagers. Because it's so rare to see Latina and Black romantic pairings, particularly in mainstream YA. There's like a well established pattern of non white protagonists tending to be paired with a white romantic partner. So it felt very unique and very personal. I reached out to Johnny. I was like, I don't know what stage of production y'all are in, or if you have a narrator in mind already, but I figured you don't lose anything by letting someone know you're interested. And that's generally how I navigate most of my life. But, um, but yeah, they responded, which was very surprising. They were like, "Yeah, I know your work, and I've been waiting to collaborate on something, and this might be perfect."
wow.
So yeah, Macmillan reached out. They had me read a sample. Johnny loved it, and the rest was history. As far as actual research, I I'll be honest and say I didn't really have to do much, which isn't typical for an audiobook. As I'm sure you and some listeners might know, narrators often have to prepare a lot of stuff in advance, from pronunciation lists to spreadsheets and character lists, and all sorts of prep work goes into what we do. And that front end work is part of why I mostly work in video games now. um,
I hear
Because
you.
I'm not nearly as organized as I probably should be. I'm not as dramatic as Raffi, but I do feel like I was able to draw on some lived experiences for this book, things like the cultural references, some of the jokes, feeling like I have to navigate my culture and the world as a young queer person that has intersectional identities. All of those things played a role, I think, and certainly they're the things that drew me to wanting to work on the book.
Well, that's such a lovely story. Thank you for sharing that with us. It's great to know the behind the mic elements, as it were. So tell us, I know you do a lot of video games, but what do you enjoy about narrating audiobooks for teens? Are there any challenges that are different than what you would get from an adult title?
Oh, so I'll be honest and say that audiobook narration in general is so challenging for me. It and it has nothing to do with like the material being for teenagers. Fiction is I mean, I'm a believer that fiction is fiction regardless of the age of the target audience. I tend to be attracted to writing that doesn't condescend its audience, however young. Because I think that teenagers are able to handle just as much and in some cases more nuance than
True.
adults. But yeah, I think as a voice actor, I can recognize that for me, audiobooks are the medium that is most challenging, which is why I respect full time narrators immensely. I used to be one. I started narrating audiobooks for the Library of Congress in DC when I first started out in voiceover.
Ah, yes, as did many audiobook narrators.
Right. Right. It's like it's the training ground for a lot of us. And I just know that like it's a significant time commitment. It can be a very grueling schedule. Sometimes you're sitting in a booth for hours editing your own audio files, no pun intended. Um,
We'll take the
and it
pun though.
yeah. Well, good. I'm the proliferator of puns in my own
Excellent.
little social network. I just know that it's very physically demanding. And I think I've learned that thankfully I'm at this point where I get to work in a variety of mediums. I have some personal health issues that have been exacerbated by the ongoing pandemic. So while I have the vocal stamina to yell and scream all day, I don't always have the physical stamina. I can get tired after like 5 hours behind the mic, and audiobook days can sometimes be longer than that in the booth, depending on what a project needs. So I'm very grateful that I've met with a lot of publishers who have given me the flexibility to accommodate me in what I need. And the folks at SAG-AFTRA have been great, and they cap hours on our sessions and things like that for my vocal health. As far as audiobooks, I'm very selective. Uh, I'm very picky because I don't always have the time in my schedule for long projects. Audiobooks can take weeks to work on.
Yes.
So I pick things that grab my attention, that I fall in love with. Like first person narration, which Canto Contigo is. It's like very immersive, and you get to connect to a character's emotions rather than feel like you're observing them from afar, which for me, third person narration can feel kind of creepy sometimes. But yeah, I don't know. People might notice if they listen to some of my other audiobook narration that a lot of it is written in first person, so I'm definitely biased. I would say challenges with YA specifically, there's a lot of intense emotion. Stakes are always high, almost always.
Yes. Yeah.
And a book can call upon you to keep that emotion consistently up and sustained throughout many chapters, because adolescence is a period of life that involves, discomfort and growth and change and transitions. And it's a lot to have to embody that over the course of a day behind the microphone. Right now, I'm in the middle of narrating an upcoming book for Sonora Reyes, who wrote The Lesbiana's Guide to Catholic School. And the first person narrator is a young person who's undocumented and struggling with fear of deportation. And there's all these interactions with police officers and ICE agents. And, we're in the US as we speak, bracing for an incoming administration that might go about enacting mass deportation for both undocumented and naturalized citizens. So that's been on my mind while I record, and I'm holding those feelings. I'm breathing in that fear. I'm reading those words, saying them into the mic. It can get difficult. There are days when I have to check in with myself and slow down and make sure that I'm able to feel those things and embody them without letting them bleed through into the day to day. And I think because of that, it's very valuable work. And I think our work as narrators offers us an opportunity to allow people to connect to these characters. It can be very true and very illuminating and cathartic. And I think it's important for people, particularly young people, to hear these stories. Um, and I feel very grateful that my voice, maybe for some young people, might offer an opportunity for perspective and connection and catharsis, because I think we need that now more than ever.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate that you can embody these fantastic characters, and thank you for giving to the audiobook work, even though it's a marathon.
I do it because I love it.
Excellent. And we love your work, so that works out for all. Thanks for being here today as well, Alejandro.
Thank you so, so much.
We've been talking with Alejandro Antonio Ruiz about Canto Contigo by Jonny Garza Villa. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, we welcome you to come back tomorrow because we're talking about more of our best of the year titles, and you can see the whole 2024 best audiobooks list at audiofilemagazine.com. We encourage you to rate us on your favorite podcast app so that others can get recommendations about top audiobooks. I'm Michele Cobb. Thanks for listening.
This episode of Behind the Mic is made possible by Brilliance Publishing.